Six Nations 2022, week number 2, and we've got Wales up against Scotland. Obviously, sides who had kind of differing fortunes in week number 1, with Wales having a pretty tough time of it over in Dublin. Scotland, a bit of a happier result for them at home against England. But yeah, we'll go through the lineups, some stats, some predictions, and you guys can let me know your thoughts on how this one is going to play out. We'll also go through the recent history as well. We will start though first with the Welsh lineup. They're at home. They've made a few changes, like I said, to that side that suffered defeat against Ireland. And I know there's a bit of kind of negative press going on in the Welsh rugby media at the moment, or maybe it's just social media, and it's to be expected, I guess, after a disappointing loss. But I don't think it's quite all doom and gloom just yet. At home, Wales are pretty seldom an easy team to beat. So fingers crossed they can show us something a bit else this time. But anyway, they've kept the same front row with Wyn Jones, Ryan Elias and Tom Francis, and the same second row with Will Rowlands and Adam Baird. I was impressed with Will Rowlands last week in that he stepped up to the plate in terms of getting through a ton of work, which is kind of what the man he's filling in for usually gets up to. So yeah, in terms of just getting through millions of tackles, I can't remember how many he had, like 17. It was a bit of a shift from him, and much kind of more than what we normally see from him. That being said, Taine Basham, who's moved to 6 this week, he had like 22, along with the only try of the game for Wales. He was really the bright spot on what was otherwise a pretty disappointing outing. Yeah, he's at 6 to make way for Jack Morgan, who's in at 7. Remember, Ellis Jenkins is out this week. So Jack Morgan's going to get his first cap for Wales, so congratulations to him. And Ross Moriarty's moved to 8. So essentially it's an all-new back row in terms of Basham being in a different position from last week. Wayne Pivac did speak in his press conference about that, saying that they were kind of looking for a bit more physicality, looking to be a bit more abrasive, and essentially you got 2 7s with Jack Morgan and Taine Basham there, although Pivac did also mention the fact that Basham's played a bit of 8 before, so I guess that's what he's expecting from him in terms of the ball carrying. So yeah, hopefully the breakdown for Wales is going to be an area where they can really target. That does mean though that Aaron Wainwright drops to the bench, so I guess he's the one who kind of pays the price a little bit, only marginally, for Ross Moriarty and the abrasive approach they're going to go for. Backs is Thomas Williams and Dan Biggar, so same 19 combo. Dan Biggar is still captain, so he didn't have much to kind of shout about last week. It just wasn't going his way, but as a captain, he'll still be growing as well. Nick Tompkins and Owen Watkin at the 12-13 combo, and the 13 jersey is one that was caused a lot of controversy last week, with Josh Adams' performances being pretty roundly criticised. It's a tough thing to move from the wing into the midfield. It takes a lot of time, especially kind of those defensive reads that you have to make, and you don't have the touchline to kind of be that next defender for you. So it is tough, and you've seen multiple guys take a while to get used to it. I know from a New Zealand perspective, it's taken us Rieko Ioane, who's been one of the world's best wingers, for him to move into the midfield, and he's still not the finished product. It's taken seasons. Like at his club level, he's been playing week in, week out in the midfield to try and get accustomed to how the game goes. So, we don't have to worry about this week because that's Josh Adams, he's got a calf strain. Apparently he's kind of touch and go, but Pivac's not willing to risk him, so Owen Watkin moves into 13. A little bit of pressure on him, to be fair, just to kind of step up at international level and show us that he is also in with a shout, because you'd like to think you could take the place instead of having a winger move in, but we'll just see. Alex Cuthbert is on the right wing, Lewis Rees-Zammit's on the left wing. I mean, although Lewis Rees-Zammit had the 11 jersey on but played right wing last week anyway, so I'm assuming those are the wings they're going to be on. We'll have to kind of wait and see. And then Liam Williams is at the back. Remember, Lewis Rees-Zammit kind of had his foot taped up last week with a knock to it in the warm-up, so I don't think we kind of saw him at full tilt last week, so fingers crossed he is 100%. The bench, Lake, Thomas and Lewis, the front row replacements, so same as last week. Seb Davis, who was a late withdrawal last week, is back in on the bench, Aaron Wainwright, like I mentioned, drops to the bench. Gareth Davis, Callum Sheedy, and Jonathan Davis back in after missing out the week before. So Jonny McNichol's out. I think that's just a selection. Ben Carter was only a late replacement for Seb Davis last week, also not there. Alice Jenkins, Josh Adams, not there. So it's changes, but not real wholesale changes for Pivac this week. For Scotland, kind of similar story. They've made a few tinkers. They've had to make one injury enforced change, and they've substituted the whole front row. So last week's bench guys, Schoolman, McInally and Nell, they get starts this week. So Turner, Sutherland and Fagerson drop to the bench. So that's clearly a rotation thing from Scotland, maybe looking to kind of emulate that bomb squad style of bringing on the front runners, but maybe he just backs both sets to do an equal job and start one week, bench one the other. Johnny Gray and Grant Gilchrist, same second row. I was impressed with Johnny Gray last week, put him in my team of the week. Gets through a ton of work and proved to be the case last week. He was getting through a heck of a lot of tackles, which is always pleasing. Sam Skinner is up from the bench to start at 6 because there's no Jamie Ritchie. He's out for the entire Six Nations. I think it was hamstring injury. He's had to have surgery. So, yeah, he is out. Hamish Watson in last week's man of the match. Matt Fagerson in the front row as well at 7 and 8. Watson got through a heap of tackles, as you would expect. Fagerson was hitting rucks and getting runs and making tackles, just doing a bit of everything. So you'd have to be pretty pleased with that forward pack, I think, if you're a Scottish fan. Ali Price, Finn Russell, same 9-10, so kind of steady as she goes. And then you got Ben White, who proved a pretty useful replacement from the bench last week. Tuipulotu and Harris are the midfield. Tuipulotu's up from the bench. He's kind of only fresh to the international scene, but he's taken to it pretty well. Is this going to be the biggest test we've kind of seen him yet? I forget how many starts he's had, but it's not a heck of a lot. So I would say probably the biggest test he's faced. But as I said, he's kind of looked the business. Sam Johnson, who was a little bit quiet last week, has dropped out of the 23. Cameron Redpath comes in on the bench. I think it'll only be his second cap after getting a really nice debut. He injured himself, and then we haven't seen him in Scotland colours for quite some time. Chris Harris I don't think he did a lot ball in hand last week, but he was defensively just doing his thing. It was the outside backs though. Duhan van der Merwe was maybe a little bit outshone by Darcy Graham last week, although that's not to say Duhan didn't get some big carries. Darcy Graham, I'll get to his stats in a second, but he was electric, and then Stuart Hogg at fullback, pretty assured, I think. Good covering play, even if there was one heart in your mouth moment when he was sweeping at the back. Aside from the forwards, the front rowers who have been dropped to the bench, you got Bradbury and Darge there as well. So Rory Darge, I think it's going to be his first cap for Scotland. Be pleased to see him get on the field. Ben White, Blair Kinghorn, who didn't come off the bench last week, and Cameron Redpath there as well. So yeah, like I said, Ritchie and Johnson not on the side who played last week. So I mentioned Taine Basham with his 22 tackles last week was a huge shift. He'll have to be on his game if Darcy Graham comes his way, because that man, from 6 carries last week, had 6 defenders beaten and 2 clean breaks, which is pretty deadly. So they'll know what he's about, but it's whether you can stop him. That's another deal. Team stats. One of the concerning ones for Wales last week was their metres per carry was 2.3. Like 4 is kind of like the nice standard you want to be aiming for. 2.3 was, they were getting pretty smothered by the Irish defence. The Welsh attack never really got going. The line-out was 8 from 12, which is too many misses. Their penalties conceded was 14, which in the scheme of things is about average. It's not too bad, but Ireland were like 6. So in terms of that game, it was a horrendously high penalty count. Their tackling percentage was 89%, which is pretty good. And they got through 187 tackles. So if not for that defensive shift with the guys like Basham and Rowlands and even Nick Tompkins and whatnot, then Wales certainly concede more points. Ireland will be certainly thinking they left some out there, but you've got to give some credit to the Welsh defence. Scotland against England, the first half, they were living off 38% possession and 28% territory, but they will be pleased with their defence. If you thought Wales' 89% was good, Scotland were at 94%, which is massive. That's virtually not quite unbeatable, but it's very close to being the highest numbers you will ever see in a test match, especially given they made 124 tackles. Line-out percentage was also 16 from 16. Their penalty count was 13, which is similar to what Wales had, but it was a lot more evenly distributed between England and Scotland in their game. So, yeah, some key areas for Wales, you would think. The line-out needs to be better. The attack needs to be just more effective generally, which is maybe easier said than done. The defence, I think, is solid, but Scotland's one proved really hard to break down. Scotland would obviously like to have a bit more ball, especially in that first half, to kind of show us what they can do, but they're happy to live without the ball. It's kind of one thing they showed last week. Recent history between the sides. I forgot to write it down. It's 4-1 for Wales. The last 5, it's 4-1, which is maybe a bit of good news for Wales fans, considering, as I said, the online stuff at the moment's not that pretty reading. But maybe encouragingly or concerningly, depending on which side of the fence you're on, the last match in Wales was a Scotland win, and that was in 2020. Although it wasn't in Cardiff, because I think that was the peak of the lockdowns, and they were using the stadium for COVID stuff. So that was in Llanelli at the Scarlets' home ground. So last year it was 25-24 to Wales, but that was that kind of red card game, which people will look back on with whatever memories, but it was a 1-point ball game. The average score across the last 5 is 22-12 to Wales, because they've got a couple of kind of comfortable ones. 2018 it was 34-7, and it was twice, and then in the autumn it was 21-10. So yeah, Wales have had a couple of good wins, but as I said, that kind of feels like ancient history at this point, because it's not where the teams are at the moment. So the last 2 games, maybe since Pivac took over, it's been 4 points to Scotland in 2020 and then 1 point to Wales in 2021. So in theory, it could be a pretty close one. Predictions wise, the bookies have got Scotland by 2, interestingly, which is a big call, seeing as Scotland's last win in Cardiff was like 2002. It's a long time. The rugby forecast algorithm goes the other way and says Wales by 7. So it is a tough one to predict, as rugby fans and media go. Often they're kind of just looking at the last game to be the be-all and end-all. And if you go on the last game, Scotland and Wales should be a one-sided one to Scotland, because Scotland were pretty decent last week and Wales were poor. But that's not the way it works. It's a new game. It's a new opportunity. And yeah, fingers crossed. I hope it is going to be a good game. If you want to watch it and you're outside the free-to-air territories, you can use a VPN. They've got the games this weekend, all the Six Nations game on BBC and ITV. So if you want to use a VPN, I'll chuck a link down to Express. They're the ones I use. Kind of works a treat, and they've got a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you want to give it a crack, you can. And you're kind of at no risk to yourself. But yeah, you guys let me know what you reckon. Do you think Scotland's going to carry this form through and be a genuine contender for the Six Nations? Or after the highs of beating England last week, do they get this bump in Wales and not manage to overcome it? From the Welsh perspective, can you see your boys bouncing back after disappointment of last week? Maybe they will be, kind of fired up after that disappointment and wanting to show the home crowd what they can do, because you saw certainly last week home fans making a big difference. But anyway, you guys let me know your thoughts, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.